Hello. In these videos, I'm going to be showing you how to handle some basic repair issues with harmoniums. So first of all, I want to demonstrate and explain the two basic types of harmoniums and the two types of keys because you deal with them differently. This harmonium here has what we call stick keys. Most harmoniums costing, say, under $500 or $600 are going to have the stick keys. That's what this harmonium has. The key is basically one just stick of wood. When you press it, it just lifts up, opening the air holes so the air can come up through the sound chamber, causing the reeds to vibrate and makes the sound. Now this harmonium here has the other type of keys, the English keys, which have a little break in them, which allows them to pivot. So when you press them, the back of the key hits the top, and it causes this to open a little more evenly. When you have a harmonium with 3 sets of reeds, you have a longer area. You have 3 holes you need to open, so this allows that to open more evenly by lifting it up on the little pivot there. This type of key is generally less prone to have problems. The stick keys is much more likely to have problems. The first thing you need to do is partially disassemble the harmonium. You need to remove this cross piece and the 2 side pieces. There will be a small screw in the back here, so you want to loosen it on each side. And then this whole piece will just lift right out. Then it's a good idea to remove this front piece. So you just loosen the 2 screws, and then it lifts up a little bit. These normally have small nails on the bottom, which go into little holes. So after you loosen these screws, you have to lift it up and out. So I'm going to remove one of the keys just to show you. As you see, it's just a stick. That's why they're called stick keys. 2 little pieces of leather here. These are what cover these holes. One problem we often find is that a note will be sounding when you're not pressing it. And what often happens is a little piece of debris gets under here, like a small piece of wood or styrofoam from packing, which does not allow the key to close properly and completely and seal tightly, so you get that sound. So the first thing to do when that happens is you just remove the key, make sure there's nothing stuck on here, and then put it back together. So here's a key that's sticking, you see. The first thing to check that at the end of the key there's a little notch, and then a little piece of wire or a nail sticking up, which guides the key. Now, you see the key here also, there's another little nail sticking up which goes through this little hole. So you have to first, when you're putting the key back, put it in the rear wire and then slip it over this one. So in this case, I can look at the wire and I can see that it's a little bit bent over to the right. So as the key gets pressed, it's holding it in place. So what I have to do is get a little pair of needle nose pliers and just straighten it out. Now it's fine. Now in many cases that's all you need to do, but sometimes you'll find that it's very rough in here. You can see the little bit of kind of slivers of wood there. Sometimes this is too tight and you have little bits of wood, so you take like an emery board and you just sand it a little bit and put it back in. Those are the 2 most common causes of sticking keys, either the wire a little out of alignment or just kind of roughness in the slot there. Another problem, sometimes you'll find that the keys might be too close together. Now if you look at these keys here, you see there's a larger gap on this side and practically no gap on that side. You know, these keys are all handmade one at a time, so there's a lot of variation in the keys, and sometimes, as you see, they'll be very tight here and sometimes you'll have bigger spaces. So what happens occasionally is that the keys might be rubbing together, so when you push one down, it might push the other one down a little bit too, or keep it from coming up. So in those cases, you need to just take it out, get a piece of sandpaper, like say 120 grit, lay it on a hard flat surface, and just lay the key down and just sand it a little bit. And make sure that the edge, you may need to get a little piece of finer paper and kind of round the edge, because you don't want to have a sharp edge on here. So if you sand it, it's going to tend to sharpen the edge. So you want to soften that with a piece of sandpaper when you're done. So you may need to sand the adjacent keys, this one and also the one next to it. And then the last cause, this one is less common, but it does happen. Now it's not a problem with this harmonium, but on some harmoniums, this little front piece of wood here is so close, so tight up against the keys that it's actually touching the keys. So when you press a key down, the front of the key is actually hitting the wood, causing it to stick. If I take this wood off, you see there's a little screw here which is acting as a spacer. So sometimes what you need to do is take your screwdriver and loosen this screw so it's sticking out further, which causes this board to be pushed out a little bit. You just need a little bit of space there, but you have to have some. In some cases I've actually had to put another screw over here because sometimes this board was a little warped, so it was kind of bending in and hitting the last keys here. So I had to put a screw here and here. So when you get this board back in place, you push it up against the screw and make sure the gap is good, and then you can tighten these screws. And you want to be careful not to over tighten these screws. Just get them gently snug, and that should be sufficient. Okay, now we're going to talk about how to deal with a buzzing reed or a rattling reed on this type of harmonium, which again has the stick keys, which are this type of one-piece key construction. So what we have to do is open the harmonium up to get into the reed chamber. We need to remove 4 screws around the perimeter. See, there will be 2 in the back. Remove it. Lift up the wire, move it off to the side. Carefully lift the key out. You see you have 2 air holes here. That's where the sound comes out. This top one here is the male reed, and this is the bass reed. This one is an octave lower. So when I play it, you're getting both reeds sounding. If I cover this one up, see, there's the higher sounding male reed. There's the lower sounding bass reed. So it's important to be able to isolate them to tell just which one is rattling or buzzing. So let's find our buzzing reed. Okay, there, you hear it? So let's remove this key and determine which reed is rattling. So I'm going to close off the bass, play the male reed, sounds fine, cover up the male. There we go. So that's... Now, this is the best way to isolate the reeds. You could also do it with the stops, but the trouble is when you have the screws out, you're not getting a tight seal. And so even if you have one stop closed, air often will leak through and go into both chambers. So it's very difficult to isolate the 2 banks of reeds using the stops when you have the screws out. So, now we know that it's this bass reed is rattling. So easiest way is to count up from the bottom. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So it'll be the 13th reed. Open it up, count up. Again, these are the male reeds, these are the bass, so we know it's the bass. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I take the reed and I just flip it a little. And you can see and hear how it's hitting the side. So we want to try to determine which side is hitting. So what we need to do is bend the reed over a little bit so it's not hitting the side. Now, you can use an X-Acto knife blade. If you have a palette knife such as this is a very good tool for that. So here's our reed. So looking at it, it looks like it's hitting on this side. So I would take the palette knife, slide it in there, and just twist it a little bit. It's going to just gently push the reed over. Now you can hear, whoops, It's not hitting anymore. Let's play it and see. There we go. Sound is gone. Now we are going to look at how to handle sticking keys on the English key or British double lifter harmonium. So again, we need to remove this cross piece. So you loosen the screws on each side, lift it off, put it in a safe place. Now first of all, you often have the problem with the front of the key hitting this piece of wood here. Now this design harmonium is constructed a little differently. This piece here is actually hinged, so when you open these little cam levers and remove these screws here, the whole top opens right up on this hinge. There we go, like that. So if you need a little more space here, the only way to do that is to put a little, like a thin washer or a little piece of thin cardboard or something here. So usually what you do is you put this screw in, and then you can put it right on the screw and very carefully close it. And then that will give you usually enough the space you need to prevent that from sticking. That's not a very common problem, but it does happen sometime. When you have keys that are sticking on this type of harmonium, again, sometimes the keys will be rubbing and you need to remove the key and just sand the side or the sides of the two keys. Now these are a little more difficult to take off. You have a spring on top here. So first you lift off the spring and move it over. Take a pair of needle nose pliers, grip the key just behind this cross piece of wood here, and then gently pull straight up. You need to rock it a little bit. Don't rock it too much because you don't want to loosen. You want it to always be tight in there. Then very carefully remove these keys. These keys are fairly fragile. As you can see, there's a groove there. That allows you to adjust the height of the keys by turning this screw, which I'll show you later. But you see there's a pivot point here. The little pieces of leather allow this to pivot. And that's why it's hinged. So when it lifts up and hits here, you see it gets at an angle, so while it's back, you have an even opening there. Instead of like that, it'll be more like that. So again, sanding the sides, and probably the most common cause of sticking on this type of harmonium is the little pads here. You see there's a layer of felt and then leather on top of that. Sometimes they're a little bit too wide and they rub. So the side of the leather is hitting the other one and that causes them to stick. Sometimes the key is a little bit too long and it's hitting the back, this little piece of wood in the back here. So sometimes what you have to do is file or sand a little bit off here. If you have an electric sander, that's the best thing, to very carefully just push it against like a sanding wheel. Or, use a file, and you just want to make sure it's very firmly on the workbench and you're just holding the key here, not by here. File it a little bit. Now for the leather and felt on the sides, there are a couple ways to go. You can get an X-Acto blade, and again, holding here, very carefully trim it. Or if you're real careful and you have a very sharp pair of scissors, you can trim it this way too. Just very carefully on the side. When you put the key back in, you see you have two little pieces of wire sticking out on either side, and these go in this little groove here. You want to be careful that you don't damage that little notch, and take the little spring and put it back, and everything should be fine. A couple of things about these keys. You see there are little screws here sticking up. Sometimes the keys are not even. You see like one might be too low, one might be too high. Well, by turning this little screw here, you can adjust the height of the key. So see, as I tighten this screw, you see how the key moves down. If I loosen the screw, it moves up. So that's how, with this type of key, you're able to level them. That's something you really cannot do with the other type. Also, there's a screw on the back of the spring here, if the key is a little too hard to push or a little too light, you can either tighten or loosen this screw, which will tighten the tension on the spring, causing it to push harder or less hard. So you can even out the pressure and the tension of the keys by adjusting those little screws there. So this type of key offers a number of advantages. And as I say, these are less prone to sticking, but if they do, it's usually caused by the felt rubbing or the back rubbing, or in rare cases, rubbing in the front here. So that should cover most of the sticking keys problem on an English key harmonium. In this video, I'm going to show you how to open up this type of harmonium with the English keys to repair a buzzing or rattling reed. So first we remove the tone chamber cover. Then we remove this cross piece. There are two screws in the back here. We loosen those screws, which I've already done. You may or may not have a screw on either side here, which serves to really tighten down the chamber. Some harmoniums have them, some don't. In this case we do have them, so we remove them. Then we have these little cam levers in the back here, which we loosen. And when we loosen those, the whole harmonium just opens right up. We don't need to remove the front piece on this type of harmonium like we do with this stick-keyed harmonium. So there we can get into the reed chamber. Now for instructions on how to actually repair the rattling reed, refer to the other video we have which shows you how to do it on a stick-key harmonium, because the procedure is the same. So, now we know that this bass reed is rattling. So, easiest way is to count up from the bottom. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So it'll be the 13th reed. Open it up, count up. Again, these are the male reeds, these are the bass, so we know it's the bass. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I take the reed and I just flip it a little. And you can see and hear how it's hitting the side. So we want to try to determine which side is hitting. So what we need to do is bend the reed over a little bit so it's not hitting the side. Now you can use an X-Acto knife blade. If you have a palette knife such as this is a very good tool for that. So here's our reed. So looking at it, it looks like it's hitting on this side. So I would take the palette knife, slide it in there, and just twist it a little bit. It's going to just gently push the reed over. Now you can hear, whoops, it's not hitting anymore. Let's play it and see. There we go, sound is gone.